The story begins with Johnny, a successful and very charming businessman, going for a morning run. Even though he seems sophisticated, he's actually someone who dates a lot of women and pretends to be different people to impress them, usually younger ones. Later in the day, at the country club, Johnny's friend Fabio tells everyone how Johnny used 3 fake identities in just 1 week to meet women. Johnny jokingly suggests that maybe his wife wants to date him. During lunch with his friend Dario, who is also his doctor, Dario asks if all the pretending to be someone else to chase women is exhausting. He advises Johnny to settle down with a mature woman, reminding him that he's almost 50. Just then, Johnny gets a call about his mom. Dario is hopeful that they have reconciled, but Johnny sadly reveals that his mother has passed away. After lunch, Johnny hurries to the graveyard but gets confused in a Filipino procession, thinking it's for his mom. He quickly apologizes to the family before finding the right spot. At the funeral, his twin brother gives a heartfelt goodbye, but Johnny skips his own speech. While explaining why he was late for the ceremony, he uses big gestures to talk about Filipino people who often work as maids. This shows that he's a bit of a racist. After the funeral is over, Johnny's brother gives him the keys to their mom's house. Inside, looking at family photos makes him a little emotional as he sits in her wheelchair. Soon, he turns on her old radio and starts dancing to a song when a young woman named Alessia sneaks in and surprises him. Alessia, the new neighbor, says she used to help disabled people at a nursing home. Seeing him in the wheelchair, she offers to volunteer if he needs anything. Johnny, who likes to play tricks, immediately starts pretending to be disabled. The next day at work, we see his tough businessman side as he criticizes his team during a meeting. He tells them that his sneaker company is all about speed and sells a lifestyle, not just shoes. The new intern Julia suggests expanding marketing with Paralympic athletes to connect with disabled customers. In response, Johnny laughs and says his clients are Instagram influencers, not disabled people who hardly use 1 pair of shoes their whole life. Trying to set an example, he immediately fires Julia. After the meeting, Johnny grabs a bag of old clothes from his assistant Luciana and hurries back to his late mother's home. Pretending to be handicapped, he persuades Alessia to have coffee with him in his kitchen. While chatting, Johnny discovers that Alessia prefers a more carefree and fun single life over serious relationships. Slowly, he realizes she likes outgoing, healthy, and wealthy guys, and his fake middle-class handicapped act seems to be failing. As Alessia leaves after coffee, Johnny sees his opportunity slipping away. He calls out and reveals that he's the owner of High Speed with 148 stores across Europe and a huge villa. Slightly surprised, Alessia instantly changes her attitude and invites him to her country house for lunch the next Sunday. On Sunday, he arrives at the address but decides to park far away. Seeing clouds gather, he puts on a raincoat and struggles to wheel himself to the house. Inside, he meets Alessia's family, including her grandmother on oxygen support, her brother, and parents. Then, Alessia's sister, Chiara, arrives in a car. He's initially captivated by her beauty but then notices that she also uses a wheelchair. Finally, he figures out why Alessia invited him to meet her disabled sister, not herself. After lunch, he talks with Chiara outside. She shares that she loves playing sports and is a professional violin player. Not very interested but trying to be polite, he just nods without saying much. When Johnny returns to Rome, he tells his friends about Chiara. His doctor friend Dario asks about her personality while others ask if she's attractive. He admits she's beautiful, but he's not interested in girls with disabilities. As the conversation continues, his friend Fabio challenges him to be with her, and Johnny agrees with a smug grin. Meanwhile, Alessia goes to his mother's home to return his raincoat but meets his brother instead, who doesn't know about Johnny's lie. She tells him about his brother's charity work in Botswana and sympathizes with his disability. Johnny's brother is surprised but goes along with it. Later, he confronts his brother about the lie, asking him not to go so low. However, Johnny avoids the topic by making fun of his brother's baldness. The next day, before going to work, he leaves a voicemail for Chiara asking her out on a Saturday. But surprisingly, Chiara visits him in his office that very morning. Realizing he doesn't have a wheelchair in his office, he awkwardly sits on his desk. Chiara tells him she can't make it on Saturday but invites him to watch her tennis tournament for disabled people later that day. Trying to impress her, he makes up a fake story about his company supporting disabled athletes. Later in the day, Johnny, in his wheelchair, watches Chiara play a challenging tennis match and is genuinely impressed. After the match, she invites him to lunch with her disabled friends. However, the lunch didn't go as he had hoped. Constantly bombarded by questions about his disability from her friends, he feels overwhelmed and even has a bad dream that night. In the next scene, Johnny flies to Turin where Chiara is performing with her orchestra. He buys an electric wheelchair from a local man and gets a balcony seat in the theater. For the first time in his life, he is genuinely moved by classical music. After the concert, he surprises Chiara, who asks why he's in Turin. He lies about being nearby for work and dropping in accidentally. They both go to a fancy restaurant for dinner. During the meal, Johnny tries to admit that he lied to her about his disability. However, at the last moment, he changes course and says he lied about being nearby, confessing that he came just to pursue her. But his clumsiness with the electric wheelchair is obvious to everyone as he keeps bumping into tables throughout the conversation. After dinner, Chiara takes him to her hotel where they kiss, but she stops things from going further, which disappoints Johnny. When he returns from Turin, Johnny asks Dario if paraplegics can have erections. Expecting where the conversation is going, Dario explains that they can, but for Chiara, pleasure depends on where her spinal injury is. He suggests Johnny forget the bet, reminding him that he's 49 and not a teenager. However, his friend playfully brushes it off. In the next scene, Johnny invites Chiara to dinner the next day before driving to pick up the girl he met on his morning run. On the other hand, Chiara has a heartfelt conversation with her sister. While they share a cigarette, she reveals how happy she is that Johnny sees her as a whole woman instead of just feeling sorry for her. The next day, Chiara comes to Johnny's big house. She moves around the furniture easily while Johnny keeps bumping into things in his wheelchair. During dinner, she asks how he ended up with paralyzed feet. Johnny makes up a story saying he had a similar accident to Christopher Reeves, the Superman actor. However, Chiara points out that Christopher Reeves was paralyzed from the neck down. Trying to save face, Johnny says he fell off a pony, which amuses Chiara. Carefully, she then shares her own story of a terrible car accident. Her passenger only broke his collarbone, and her violin on the next seat didn't even get scratched. But in a sad twist of fate, she lost the use of both of her legs. Trying to lighten the mood, Johnny reveals his big surprise. He gives her a rubber noodle and asks her to put it around her chest. Then he presses a button and water floods the dining room, rising up to their chest, protected by the rubber noodle. They float weightless in the water. In a moment of passion, they kiss and make love. However, later, when the water dries out, Chiara tells Johnny that she has no feeling below her legs. Clearly emotional but confused, Johnny shares that he, too, only felt it in his forehead. When she falls asleep, he quickly takes a selfie of them to show off to his friends. The next day, Johnny shows the photo to his friends, winning his bet with Fabio. However, he doesn't mention that Chiara can't feel anything. Later that night, we see Fabio's wife at Johnny's house. She's in her nightdress and accidentally breaks a wine glass. Jokingly, she says she's being clumsy like a handicapped person, which offends Johnny. Without explaining why, he tells her to get dressed and leave. Days go by without Johnny and Chiara talking, but we slowly see changes in his perspective on life. He asks Luciana to find the intern who suggested expanding the marketing of the shoe company to paraplegic athletes. The next day, during his morning run, he calls Chiara and asks to set up a meeting, saying he has an important confession. After that, he goes to her house. Chiara takes him to her room and asks him to wait while she finishes her violin practice. For the first time since they met, he sees photos of when she could still use both her legs. Feeling burdened by the lie, he stands to confess but sits down before she turns around. Noticing Johnny being less jittery than usual, Chiara says he's getting better at using his wheelchair. They kiss and she asks him about his confession. However, he doesn't have the courage to do it, so he quickly changes the topic. They then share a nervous laugh as she remembers her ex-boyfriend dumping her after her accident. With a heavy heart, Chiara confesses that lies and deception hurt her more than her injuries. Hearing this, Johnny becomes scared, so he decides to keep his secret to himself for now. Chiara then asks him to introduce her to his friends. As a result, he forces Dario and Luciana to come to dinner along with them. On the way, Dario suggests he might be in love and urges him to confess and put an end to this shame. Furthermore, he threatens that if Johnny doesn't confess, either he or Luciana will. Later, during dinner, Dario encourages his friend to tell the truth. Seeing Johnny hesitate, Dario decides to do it himself when suddenly Johnny spills soup on his suit and asks him to come to the bathroom. Inside the bathroom, Dario tells Johnny he must confess because this lie has gone too far now. However, their conversation is interrupted by a restaurant employee. Quickly, Johnny pretends to use the bathroom to hide the fact that he can walk. Throughout the night, he pretends to be paralyzed and the truth stays hidden once again. Johnny's brother visits Alessia with flowers and reveals Johnny's lies to her. Angry about the deception, she goes to Johnny and slaps him. She then gives him a 2-day ultimatum to tell Chiara the complete truth. Later, our hero visits his estranged father, who also turns out to be a womanizer. However, during a heartfelt conversation with his son, he expresses regrets about being a bad husband and urges Johnny not to make the same mistakes and confess the truth. However, Johnny fears losing Chiara if the truth is exposed. It's clear that he has fallen in love with her. Their conversation is interrupted by an announcement about a trip to Lourdes, a famous Catholic site in France known for its rumored healing powers in the holy water. Dad and son get a crazy idea. Johnny plans to take Chiara to Lourdes, pretend the water there heals his fake disability, and win her back. On the other hand, Alessia gently tells her sister that Johnny might not be the best match for her. But their talk is interrupted by a call from Johnny asking Alessia to go to Lourdes with him. Alessia is surprised and asks why they're going. Chiara thinks Johnny wants a miracle. Tired of hiding, Chiara reveals she knows he can walk and she kept quiet because she liked being loved even if it was based on lies. Later, they reach the Notre Dame of Lourdes sanctuary where Father Walter, an Italian, greets them. He asks Johnny to meet him alone in the cathedral. Father Walter tells Johnny he knows he's not really disabled and warns him not to stand up in front of everyone as it could give false hope and make people believe in miracles. Shortly after that, Johnny comes out of the cathedral still pretending to be disabled. Meanwhile, Chiara walks into the middle of the road without realizing a truck is coming. When Johnny sees this, he stands up and pulls her out of danger. Although scared, she goes along with it, pretending that him walking is a miracle. She gets on the bus and leaves crying. Back in Rome, Johnny's life starts falling apart bit by bit. At the club, Fabio, who knows about the affair, confronts him. To make things worse, Luciana quits her job. Feeling lost, Johnny visits his mother's grave and expresses his love for her for the first time. He then hires Julia again and gives her the job of launching the new ad campaign she had suggested earlier, featuring disabled athletes. Desperate to see Chiara, Johnny goes to her parents' house and faces her grandmother. He opens up, explaining that Chiara isn't answering his calls. However, the old lady responds that Chiara is too smart to fall for someone like him, knowing what men like him want. Johnny then admits he is 50, physically fit but mentally a mess. Then he tells Chiara he loves her and promises to be a better person, accidentally breaking a vase in his passionate talk. Hearing this, the old lady shares that Chiara is taking a bus to the Menotti Theater in Spoleto. She gives him the details and says he can catch her at Nami if he hurries. But before he goes, she warns him that if he hurts Chiara again, she won't hesitate to make his handicap real. Luckily, he catches up to the bus in time. However, Chiara, not ready to forgive, tells him she doesn't need pity and ignores his pleas, asking the bus to move on. In the next scene, we see Johnny in Rome, running with guilt until he collapses on his knees. To his surprise, Chiara, in her wheelchair, appears. When he asks why she's in Rome, she playfully says she was just passing by and happened to look for running trails. Choosing to forget the past, she hugs him and gives him a ride on her lap. Lastly, Johnny's brother dating Alessia and Chiara's family celebrate Johnny's 50th birthday together. The credits roll as Johnny carries Chiara in his arms and they dance slowly. Thank you for watching.